Well, my friends, it is here. The day we've all been waiting for is here. My newest book, or it's two books actually, is here. Wait, are here? How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery is here, and the accompanying Discovery Workbook is also here. It's a double quasi discovery excitement day. So, what the heck is this book, How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery, about? And wait, Livia, when did you decide to also write a workbook for it? Well, I am so glad you asked, my friend. First off, let's establish that quasi recovery fucking sucks. And to be completely honest with you, it's worse than having an eating disorder. Rather than being fully committed to restriction and exercise and quote unquote health and perfectly following the rules of the eating disorder, quasi recovery is trying to get the best of both worlds, but in doing so, ending up in the worst corner of any world. You don't want mental hunger. You want to be able to eat whatever you want whenever you want. But of course, you don't want to gain quote unquote too much weight or feel too uncomfortable or, God forbid, develop diabetes or other health issues because all you really want to eat is high calorie quote unquote junk food. This is why you feel the need to follow external rules because you can't trust yourself, right? The same thing goes for exercise. You don't want it to feel like a chore. You want to experience what they call joyful movement. You want to be okay with resting, but once again, you don't trust yourself. Because what if taking a break from exercise leads you to become unhealthy or lose all motivation to exercise ever again? All in all, you just don't want this constant battle in your head anymore. You don't want these constant thoughts telling you you're not good enough, and you're sick and tired of this constant searching for the quote unquote right way to recover. You just want to be free from all of this, free from the eating disorder, but also from the recovery identity. And deep down, the super wise part of you that operates on a dimension far beyond logical comprehension knows that you have what it takes to achieve that freedom. But you're scared, and your fear is valid. It's the fear of change, opportunity, and perhaps failure. You tell yourself you've tried to recover before and failed, so why should you try again? Besides, what will replace your eating disorder once you do fully commit to discovery? What if you're more miserable afterwards? What if it's too late for you anyways? Now, what I just said about your fear being valid and questioning all these unknowns is actually quoted straight from my book, How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery, and then I continue on to define quasi recovery, and well, the whole book kind of takes off from there, so we're not going to unpack that in this episode. But I do want to share why I wrote this book. It goes without saying that writing an entire book is a huge commitment in and of itself, so it has to be fully aligned with my being to dedicate an entire year. Well, at this point, it's been more than a year since I wrote this book, to the process from what Anne Lamott calls a shitty first draft to a published book in multiple formats. Because, yes, How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery is available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook, narrated by me, of course. The Discovery Workbook, which I shall tell you about in a moment, is available as a paperback and ebook over on Amazon and all the other main places. But if you order via my own online bookstore, livelabelfreebooks.com, you can buy it as a spiral bound notebook, which I honestly prefer over a standard paperback. And when you purchase the ebook via livelabelfreebooks.com, I'll send you three different digital formats. You'll receive the EPUB, which is short for electronic publication, and it's an ebook format with which you can adjust fonts and such. So, this is the version that's also on Amazon. You'll also receive the PDF of the ebook, which is just a digital version of the print interior. And you'll also receive a Word doc file, which you can open in Word or Google Docs or wherever you open documents. And huge shout out to my client Charlie for this Word doc idea, because not only does this format make the workbook more accessible, but it also allows you to type directly into the workbook. So, going back to the process of shitty first draft to published book, what even is my process, and how does this process parallel the process of discovering your true self after an eating disorder? Well, when I commit to writing a book, I do it because my entire being, my soul, so to speak, is being pulled to the page. When I started writing How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery in February of 2024, my being was being pulled to materialize the explosion of emotions and thoughts and ideas I had about quasi recovery because I wanted you, the person that I once was, the person that's living in fear and looking for a map out of the prison that is quasi recovery. I wanted you to find freedom. I want you to find freedom. Note my word choice here. I don't want you to know recovery is possible or any shallow statements like that. Because the truth is, you don't know recovery is possible for you. How can you? You've never experienced it before. Because here's the thing, my friend, knowledge, by definition, is something that has already happened. The only reason you know how to read is because you've read before. I mean, imagine telling a child that they can only start reading once they already know how to read. Excuse the silly example, but I do hope you get where I'm getting at. The only way you learned how to read was by putting one foot in front of the other, or in this case, reading word by word. In the case of finding freedom from an eating disorder, or as I like to call it, an eating adaptation, of course you don't know if the mental hunger will go away. Of course you don't know if you can handle the responsibilities that come with being healthy. Of course you don't know if you'll truly be happier when the eating disorder story is finally behind you. Again, this isn't because freedom isn't possible, but it's because, as I just alluded to, knowledge comes after experience. What this means is that you will only know what it's like to be fully recovered when you first claim the permission to discover a fully recovered life. And I use the word discovery very intentionally here, because this isn't about following in someone else's footsteps. This isn't about matching your life up to some YouTuber who claims to be recovered or some Instagram influencer that's all about intuitive eating or what have you. True freedom emerges when you stop trying to look for the map and instead you open yourself up to discovering your unique version of fully recovered, your unique version of food, body, and movement freedom. Of course, it's working without a map that causes most people to enter the land of quasi recovery in the first place. You want evidence, proof. You want to know that what you're doing isn't wrong. You want proof that honoring mental hunger won't lead you to swing to the other side and lead you to develop an even more messed up relationship with food. But here we go again with knowing. Proof is a trap, my friend. Or to put it more eloquently, absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence. Let that sink in for a moment. In fact, I'm going to say it again because it is so powerful. Absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence. Okay, so if my book doesn't give you a map about how to do recovery, quote unquote, right, well, then what is it about? Well, as I said on my recent podcast with Victoria, what often happens is that you get sick and tired of the eating disorder, and so you decide to recover. But instead of fully committing to the trust fall, instead of confronting the void of your own potential, instead of tapping into your inner artist and embarking on your own unique path, you look at what other people are doing. You constantly look for permission slips to eat what you crave. You allow yourself to gain weight, but there's a catch. It has to be the quote unquote healthy way. You won't permit yourself to gain weight, quote unquote, too fast. And if you do fully honor your mental hunger and it turns into a quote unquote binge, well, then you've just proven you can't trust yourself, right? So back to restricting the next day to balance everything out and achieve that state of being quote unquote perfectly hungry. Basically, you're halfway committed to freedom while simultaneously building all these walls around how to create that freedom the quote unquote right way. Because to embark on this journey without copying what people on YouTube or Instagram are doing, well, that would be just too much of a trust fall, right? But as so many of you listening to this have experienced firsthand or are experiencing right now, quasi recovery makes you feel trapped all over again because you're constantly second guessing your recovery rather than doing the work that actually makes a difference. This is the work of learning to trust yourself. And instead of waiting for permission or searching for permission online or in books or what have you, how to get out of quasi recovery teaches you how to claim the permission to create your own life. This is not just another eating disorder recovery book filled with the standard recovery advice you already know. Because the truth is, advice is useless if you don't commit to the trust fall. If merely knowing what to do actually made a difference, you wouldn't still be stuck in recovery, right? What obviously also makes this book unique is that it naturally incorporates the neurodivergent perspective. For me personally, as someone who is autistic and ADHD, my eating disorder was rooted in reasons that were drastically different than for someone who is neurotypical. Meaning, my discovery journey was also drastically different, and honestly, my entire life now is still drastically different than someone who is neurotypical. So rather than telling you to smash the scale or stop counting calories or even to take a break from exercise, this book invites curiosity. I don't demonize the eating disorder. I don't claim it to be a demon that must be fought to the death. I don't even tell you to face your fears in this book. Instead, I completely turn the tables. I invite you to view the eating disorder not as a disorder, but as a powerful adaptation, an adaptive attempt to solve the existential questioning, an adaptive attempt to conform, an adaptive attempt to make this overwhelming world a little more manageable. Regarding fear, the typical recovery ultimatum is that you must overcome your fears, and that's how you find freedom. But again, I take a radically different approach. Instead of viewing fear as your enemy, I teach you how to use fear as your partner. Because the truth is, my friend, what we fear most is often what we know in our hearts we most need to do. Speaking of doing, that's where the Discovery Workbook comes in. Now that I think about it, I actually created this workbook exactly 1 year after I started writing the main How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery book, which my autistic brain is like, yay, that just makes sense. The reason I created this workbook was because I wanted to create a really practical, hands on resource that would allow you to turn your insights from the main book into concrete reflection moments of your eating adaptation, and also to give you space to outline your unique path to freedom. Because let's face it, one person's way out may actually lead you to feel more lost. So, the Discovery Workbook is really here to help you to stop doing the motions of recovery and instead to finally start creating the life you know in your heart you are capable of living. So, my friends, if you're tired of being stuck in that frustrating middle ground between your eating disorder and true freedom, and you want an approach that's unlike anything you've ever tried before, these books are for you. You can grab both How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery and the Discovery Workbook at livelabelfreebooks.com to get the best formats and to support my work directly, or find them on Amazon. Of course, I'll leave all the appropriate links in the show notes as well. I am beyond excited for you to break free from the recovery identity so you can start living a life that's actually worth living. I hope to see you on the pages, and otherwise, I'll talk to you in the next episode. Bye bye for now.